In previous years, I think it's been much easier to decide which iPhone to buy, but this year Apple has thrown a few curveballs our way and have made the decision all the more difficult. They've introduced a much more capable, feature-rich iPhone 17, the all-new form factor of the iPhone Air in a super thin and light design, and they've made the iPhone 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max more capable than ever and have updated its design to give it a fresh and bold new look. If, like me, you normally lean towards the Pro phones, I think this year is an especially difficult decision because the iPhone Air offers some Pro-level performance, but in a much slimmer, lighter form factor. And so this video is for you. We're going to talk about design, performance, battery, their camera differences, and any other unique features to each phone. Hopefully by the end of the video, you'll know which one is right for you. So let's get started by talking about design. In many respects, these two phones are almost the antithesis of one another. The iPhone Air is the thinnest and lightest iPhone that Apple has ever created, while the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max are the heaviest and thickest iPhones that Apple has ever made. And yet, there is still some feature overlap, but we need to talk about things like the materials that they're made from and how they feel in the hand, because that will play a big role, I think, for many people in which iPhone they ultimately decide to pick. Starting with the iPhone Air, it actually has more in common with the iPhone 15 Pro and 16 Pro than the iPhone 17 Pro does. It's using titanium that Apple first introduced with the iPhone 15 Pro, and Apple has chosen that material intentionally because titanium is incredibly resistant to cracking and bending. They've sandwiched it in between two pieces of glass, but this year it's not regular glass, it's Apple's new ceramic shield 2 on the front. And that glass has been shown in testing to be far more resistant to scratches than in previous year's iPhones. But for the first time, they're also using ceramic shield on the back, and that means that the iPhone Air, as Apple has claimed, is the most durable iPhone that they have ever made, and a lot of the third-party testing does seem to bear that out. What's really fascinating about the iPhone 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max is that Apple has actually transitioned away from titanium, and I think that raised a few eyebrows because it was only 2 years ago that Apple was really bigging up the move to titanium thanks to its durability and how much lighter it is. And so the move to aluminium, I think it was surprising, but when you break it down, it actually really makes a lot of sense. For starters, aluminium is actually even lighter than titanium. But crucially, and I think more importantly, it's a far more effective dissipator of heat. Some people even found that their iPhone 15 Pro and 16 Pro could actually overheat during sustained workloads. Apple wanted to avoid that and make these new 17 Pro and Pro Max handsets far more power efficient and more capable than any previous model, and the move to aluminium, I think, was a key decision in enabling just that. When it comes to feel in the hand, the iPhone Air, you get a really good sense of its scale from photos, but when you see it in person, when you pick it up, all of a sudden you start to get it. It just feels unlike any iPhone that Apple has ever previously created. It feels just like you're holding a screen. And the first time I picked it up, I couldn't help but smile because I was so impressed that Apple was able to pack in so much capability into such a small and light form factor. The 17 Pro and Pro Max actually feel significantly different in the hand to the iPhone 12 through iPhone 16 Pro series, and that's for one key reason. Apple has rounded the rear edges. It's not a fully rounded edge like the iPhone 10 for example, but it moves far away from the almost 90-degree edge that we had on the iPhone 12 series. It's far more comfortable in the hand, especially for the Pro Max model, and I think it's kind of a happy medium between the two designs. It's not the fully rounded edge that we had with the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 11 series, but it's not that sharp angular design that we had from the iPhone 12, and yet the edges are still flat enough that the phone is nice and easy to grip, and it doesn't feel like it's going to slip out of your hand. So I'm a really big fan, and I also like the two-tone design on the back as well. It makes the phone feel even more premium, and I really like the design choice that Apple has made with the glass window. It just looks great. I think it's important to acknowledge that Apple's design choices here, they're not just aesthetic choices, they're also functional choices as well. They lean very heavily into performance, battery life, and camera capabilities, so we're going to talk about those now, starting with performance. Both of these phones contain the same chipset, and that's Apple's A19 Pro chip. However, there is a key difference. The variant inside the iPhone Air is a binned down version of the chip. It contains one less GPU core compared to the version found in the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max. Both chips do contain the same amount of RAM, so multitasking performance should be fairly similar, but for more graphically intensive workloads, things like exporting images from Lightroom or demanding games, there is going to be a notable difference because of that processor architecture. There are other functional reasons as well, which we'll get into in a moment. You may be wondering, why did Apple choose to use its most powerful chip in the iPhone Air, considering it is such a thin light design? Well, the key reason is that the A19 Pro is actually more power efficient than the base A19 chip found in the standard iPhone 17. In addition to the decision to use a more power efficient processor, Apple has also made several other key optimizations for the iPhone Air to improve its performance and also to help with battery life. One key decision was to use their own custom designed in-house modem. It's called the C1X chip, and it's the second generation modem from Apple. It's twice as fast as Apple's first generation modem, the C1, that was used in the iPhone 16e only earlier this year. Apple is still using the power-hungry Qualcomm modems in its iPhone 17 and 17 Pro series, and you may be wondering why. Well, the key reason is millimeter wave. Apple's own modem does not support millimeter wave, and Apple has made that decision strategically. Millimeter wave is only widely available in certain countries, mostly the US. It's not even widely available within the countries that you can get access to millimeter wave, and the radio frequencies required to deliver millimeter wave 5G can be blocked by things like rainwater, leaves, let alone walls and buildings. And so it just didn't really make sense for Apple to prioritize its inclusion in the iPhone Air when the main design goal of the iPhone Air was to make a super thin, portable and light form factor. There's another new piece of silicon that Apple is including across its entire iPhone lineup this year. It's called the N1 chip. The N1 combines Wi-Fi, Bluetooth and Thread all into a single chip. Not only is that more power efficient, but it also helps to keep the costs of the phone fairly similar to previous years because Apple is no longer relying on a third-party supplier, in this case Broadcom, for these particular features. Instead, it's all made in-house. It means you get a better battery life, but it also helps to preserve the price. In real-world testing, I didn't perceive any significant difference in performance between these two phones for everyday tasks. Things like email, browsing the web, listening to music, even some casual gaming, performance was pretty comparable. Now when it comes to more heavy-duty tasks, so running things like more demanding games like Resident Evil 2, or doing more demanding edits in Lightroom, that's where I did start to see some differences. I noticed that export times were faster on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and I noticed that the phone stayed significantly cooler than the iPhone Air. And I think there's two key reasons for that. The first reason is that the iPhone 17 Pro Max, not only is it made out of aluminium, but it also has a vapor chamber. And what that vapor chamber helps to do is to dissipate the heat throughout the length of the phone. The iPhone Air, all of its silicon is located at the top of the phone inside what Apple is calling the camera plateau, and because the heat is concentrated into one area and it doesn't have a vapor chamber, it means that the phone begins to overheat more quickly than the iPhone 17 Pro. Apple did talk about this in its keynote, and it said that the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max offers 40% better sustained performance than in previous year's Pro models. Benchmarks do highlight the differences in performance between these two phones quite well. For CPU intensive tasks, as you can see, the iPhone Air and the iPhone 17 Pro, at least on paper, seem to perform quite comparably. When it comes to GPU intensive tasks, there is quite a gulf in performance. It's actually almost 20%, and that's surprising considering there's only one less GPU core in the iPhone Air, but I do think it's down to the vapor chamber and the choice to use aluminium on the Pro models. When it comes down to it, I think most people are going to be very happy with the performance that they get from the iPhone Air, especially if you're upgrading from a previous Pro model iPhone, even last year's iPhone 16 Pro, and certainly if you're upgrading from a base model iPhone. What Apple has been able to achieve here is nothing short of impressive. But if you choose the iPhone 17 Pro or Pro Max, you're almost getting this all-out assault vehicle. It's incredibly powerful and it'll last you for years and years. Whichever phone you decide, I don't think you can go wrong as it relates to performance. It's just a case of whether or not you need that extra little boost that is only found on the iPhone 17 Pro. We've talked about the design choices that Apple has made for these two phones, and we've talked about the performance that those design choices have unlocked. But there's one big elephant in the room that we haven't yet spoken about, and that's battery life. Naturally, being such a thin and light device, the iPhone Air has a much smaller capacity battery than the much thicker and heavier iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max. Apple has actually put the largest batteries that they have ever put in an iPhone in this year's Pro lineup. And those differences are certainly significant and it's worth noting, but they're not as significant as you may think. In my own testing, I was actually very impressed with the battery life that I got from the iPhone Air. Most days, for casual use, I was getting to the end of the day with over 20% battery life. If I was running more demanding apps and running more demanding games, then I could certainly get the battery to drain down to 0 in the course of a single day. With the 17 Pro and Pro Max, for casual use, I was getting to the end of the day with around 40% plus battery life. And when I was running more demanding apps, doing edits in Lightroom, I was finding that I was getting to the end of the day still with around 20%. And if you compare that with the iPhone Air, where I was getting to 20% at the end of the day with fairly casual use, it does show a significant gulf in their performance as it relates to battery. That being said, I think for the average user, the iPhone Air is going to be absolutely fine. You'll get through a day quite comfortably, and if you're concerned that you won't get through a day, Apple has a solution for that with their MagSafe battery. It's important to call out though that the MagSafe battery is an additional cost and it's adding bulk and weight to the iPhone Air, and the reason that so many people will choose the iPhone Air is because it feels so nice in the hand. Once you start to add on additional accessories like a heavy battery to the back, then it kind of defeats the purpose of buying the iPhone Air in many ways. That being said, it's still an option and you don't have to use the accessory all of the time. And I think for a lot of people, they just want that peace of mind and reassurance of knowing that they can get through a full day. And so Apple has considered that. And if you want it, it's available to buy for $99 or £99 if you're here in the UK. Okay, so now let's talk about the big one, and that's cameras. And there's only one way that we can test the cameras properly, and that's to get outside, take some photos and videos, and then we'll do some side-by-side comparisons. I think that the number one deciding factor for most people is going to be their vastly different camera systems. They both have the exact same front-facing selfie camera, and it's amazing. But the rear cameras tell a different story. The iPhone 17 Pro Max is equipped with 3 48 megapixel sensors. One is a wide lens, one is an ultra wide, and one is a telephoto that can do 4x optical quality zoom or an 8x 12 megapixel crop. The iPhone Air has just that rear 48 megapixel wide sensor, but it doesn't have the ultra wide and it doesn't have a telephoto either. Now you can do a 2x optical quality digital zoom, albeit at 12 megapixels, but if you want to capture those more expansive, wider shots, then you'll need to physically move back away from your subject, and in some situations, that's just not possible. I also think another thing that you should consider is the different creative options that you need. When you're doing things like travel or going to events or concerts, you may want the option to get closer to the subject, and so that's where the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max come into effect. They're both amazing camera systems, but only you know your individual use case, and I think it's important just to take that into consideration before you make your purchase decision. Comparing the main camera on the two phones, you do get slightly sharper images on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and that isn't surprising considering it has a slightly larger sensor than that found on the iPhone Air and the iPhone 17. Looking at zoom levels, the iPhone Air offers a 2x zoom. Apple calls it optical quality, but it's actually using the center 12 megapixels of the 48 megapixel main camera to create a digital crop. The iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max use a true 4x optical quality zoom at 48 megapixels with no digital cropping, and you can really appreciate the difference in clarity and how much closer you can get to your subject. And of course, one thing that you can do on the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max that you can't do on the iPhone Air is take ultra wide images. On the iPhone Air, you'll need to physically back away from your subject instead. Using the center 12 megapixels of the sensor, the iPhone Air can offer a 2x optical quality zoom in video, and the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max can pull off that same party trick, but they offer 8x optical quality zoom. You can do a 6x digital zoom on the iPhone Air, but the results aren't that great and image quality starts to fall apart. Thanks to the inclusion of the ultra-wide camera, the iPhone 17 Pro, Pro Max and iPhone 17 can all do macro photos. It's a bit more of a niche feature, but it's another creative option that just isn't available on the iPhone Air, so again, something to take into consideration. Action mode is a really interesting one on these two phones. You're choosing between clarity and stabilization. Both the Air and the Pro Max have a 1x lens, which has a sharp image, but only the 17 Pro Max has the ultra wide, which provides a more stable image, but you do sacrifice a little bit of sharpness as a result. Then again, it's nice to have the option, and you don't have that on the Air. So this is a front-facing video sample taken on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and one of the things I'm noticing straight away is I like the fact that because the camera is positioned horizontally, it means I'm looking directly into the camera and not awkwardly off to the side. But also, what do you think about the sound from the microphone? Does it sound good to you? Well, compare it to the iPhone Air. Let me know if you notice any differences. What do you think about the image quality and how does it sound? Does it sound better than the iPhone 17 Pro Max? Let me know. All of the new iPhones this year have the same image sensor, the same image processing pipeline, so results should be pretty much the same across the board. Oh, and another really cool feature about this phone is the ability to do dual capture video. It records a video of the things that you're seeing while also recording a video of you. You can just see that this is going to be a super popular feature of things like concerts and events. And one of the things I've already noticed that you can't do is you can't use center stage for the front-facing camera at the same time as doing dual capture video. So Apple, if you're listening, maybe we can get that feature for next year. So while I was making this video, one of the things that I've come to really appreciate about the iPhone is just how capable its camera system is in such a small, compact form factor. That form factor unlocks creative opportunities and possibilities that just aren't as easily accessible on a mirrorless camera. Shots that would require far more setup are much easier and simpler to achieve on an iPhone, purely because the device is so small, light, portable, and lets you get much closer to the subject without so much hassle. One difference I did notice in image processing between these two phones is in their handling of exposure. The 17 Pro Max seemed to more consistently and evenly handle exposure regardless of the focal length or lens chosen. Another big difference between these two phones is their performance in low light conditions. The 17 Pro Max does have a larger image sensor than the main camera on the iPhone Air, also the iPhone 17 as well. But the iPhone Air doesn't have a telephoto camera, and Apple's increased the sensor size of the telephoto lens on the 17 Pro Max by 56%. So again, let's do some low light images and see what results we get in post. Both phones perform comparably in low light at 1x. Although in this case I actually preferred the iPhone Air's image. The image was in sharper focus, but it was a cold night, so maybe my hand was just a bit shaky taking the other image. In this specific example, it just highlights how useful it is to have that 4x telephoto option on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. You can get much closer to the subject, and you can even see fine detail like in the spiderweb here. That's exemplified even further here on the 8x zoom on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and it actually really nailed the black levels. The ultra-wide doesn't fare quite as well in low light. There's a little bit more noise introduced in the sky, and you can see that some of the lighting starts to get blown out. I was pretty impressed with how both phones performed. There's a lot of ambient light sources, and of course there's a lot of reflection here in the canal. I didn't see too much lens flare, and exposure was pretty much spot on. In this example of a selfie taken in low light, the image is a little bit soft, and I did enable portrait mode in order to try and get some bokeh from the lights behind me, and while the portrait result was okay, I did notice some softening around the edges of my face. So when it comes down to low light performance, the iPhone Air performs really well for stills, and so does the iPhone 17 Pro Max, unsurprisingly. When it comes to video, the story is a little bit different, especially for the 17 Pro Max, considering it now has a larger image sensor in the telephoto camera. So let's take a look at some video and see what the differences are really like. The iPhone Air didn't seem to handle stabilization very well, which surprised me considering it does have sensor shift stabilization. The iPhone 17 Pro Max in the same scenario seemed to handle it a little bit better. Maybe it was my movement speed, but the results speak for themselves. Front-facing video does get a bit noisy and pixelated, especially in the sky as you can see in this example, and that was with the help of ambient light. Unfortunately, the low light image noise does extend to the 4x optical zoom of the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and the situation only gets worse once you switch to the 8x zoom. It's disappointing considering the larger sensor, but the camera doesn't lie. There's less noise on the ultra-wide, but the image is a bit soft and overexposed. We've compared most of the key differences between these two phones, but there are some smaller differences that you should also be aware of. The iPhone Air only has a single speaker located at the top of the phone, and that may not be a deal breaker for everybody, especially if you tend to use your phone in portrait and you scroll through things like social media, things like Reels and TikTok videos. But if you tend to watch a lot of long form content on your iPhone and you're holding the phone in landscape, you won't get that stereo separation that you may be accustomed to from previous models of iPhone. Then again, if you tend to use your iPhone mostly with headphones or AirPods, it's probably a non-issue for you. Another key difference to be aware of is that while the iPhone Air does contain an A19 Pro chip, some of the Pro level camera features found on the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max, like the ability to take Pro RAW and ProRes images and videos, that's not available on the iPhone Air. That feature remains exclusive to the Pro models, and so if you're a content creator or you want the most flexibility, as we talked about in the camera section, you may still want to lean towards the iPhone 17 Pro or 17 Pro Max. So that's a wrap on this video. Hopefully it's made your decision between the iPhone Air and the iPhone 17 Pro or Pro Max that little bit easier. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. This is my first ever full-length YouTube video on this channel, and your support would be greatly appreciated. In future weeks, I plan to create and share reviews for Apple's new AirPods Pro 3, the Apple Watch Ultra 3, along with other products that Apple will ship in the October period. Thanks again everyone for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.